Welcome back to Mystery Minds, the channel where we dive into the darkest corners of true crime, uncovering stories that shock, intrigue, and leave us questioning the world around us. In today's case, we unravel a story of an underground empire, a sprawling network of crime that wove its threads through loyalty, greed, and fear. This is the story of the Triads, China's criminal empire. A tale of clandestine dealings, betrayal, and unimaginable power, this case reveals the hidden mechanics of one of the world's most infamous criminal syndicates. How did this secretive organization gain such influence, and who were the individuals willing to risk everything to challenge it? Stay with us as we uncover the shadowy world of the Triads and the people caught in their deadly grip. In the shadowy underworld of Hong Kong, where loyalty is fleeting and betrayal lurks around every corner, Wei Zhang, a trusted lieutenant of the Sun Yee On Triad, is thrust into a deadly power struggle with Jun Wu, a cold and calculating enforcer whose ambitions threaten to destroy everything. As secrets unravel and alliances crumble, the question looms, in a world ruled by greed and blood, who will outwit and outlast the other, and at what cost? Our story begins in the 1980s, in the neon-drenched streets of Hong Kong, a city alive with energy, opportunity, and danger. Amid the towering skyscrapers and bustling street markets was a hidden world ruled by shadows. The Triads, a powerful criminal syndicate with roots stretching back centuries, operated in the city's underbelly, their influence reaching into every corner of society. The Triads were not just criminals, they were an empire built on secrecy, loyalty, and violence. For Wei Zhang, a young man from a poor fishing village on the outskirts of Guangdong, the Triads represented more than danger, they represented power. Growing up in a family that could barely afford a roof over their heads, Wei had watched his father toil endlessly to provide for them. He often saw fishermen return with empty nets and merchants haggle for hours over pennies. Life in the village was suffocating, a monotonous cycle of labor and survival. But whenever Triad members passed through, their sharp suits, expensive watches, and confident demeanor painted a very different picture of life. They were feared, yes, but they were also admired. They commanded respect in ways Wei had never seen. When Wei turned 19, he left his village with a single goal: to carve out a better life for himself. He arrived in Hong Kong with little more than the clothes on his back and a determination that burned in his chest. He quickly found that the city was as unforgiving as it was alluring. Jobs were scarce for someone without connections, and Wei was soon working long hours as a dockhand, earning barely enough to keep a small rented room. But even in those long nights on the harbor, surrounded by the scent of salt water and the hum of machinery, he couldn't ignore the quiet operations happening in the shadows. Crates moved under the cover of darkness, money exchanged in whispered conversations. These were the workings of the Triads. Wei's entry into the organization wasn't by chance. He sought them out, making himself known to the Sun Yee On Triad, one of the most feared factions in Hong Kong. It was a dangerous gamble, but Wei knew that to rise above his circumstances, he had to take risks. After months of proving his loyalty and resourcefulness, Wei was invited to join their ranks. His initiation was a ceremony shrouded in ritual and secrecy. In a darkened room, surrounded by flickering candles and thick clouds of incense, Wei swore an oath of loyalty that bound him to the Triad for life. From that moment on, he wasn't just Wei Zhang. He was a brother in the Sun Yee On, part of a sprawling criminal empire. Wei quickly distinguished himself within the organization. His sharp mind and unflinching determination earned him the attention of Chairman Lin, the leader of the Sun Yee On. Wei began working on smuggling operations, a cornerstone of the Triad's business. He was responsible for moving high-value contraband drugs, counterfeit goods, and stolen antiquities through Hong Kong's harbors. The work was dangerous and demanded precision, but Wei thrived under pressure. His success brought him wealth and status, but it also brought scrutiny. In the Triads, loyalty was everything. Betrayal wasn't just punished, it was obliterated. Brothers who turned against the organization were never seen again, their fates a whispered warning to others. Wei learned quickly that the greatest threat wasn't always from outside, it was often from within. Ambition was both a weapon and a liability. Wei's rise through the ranks didn't go unnoticed. His growing influence stirred resentment among older, more established members. While Wei worked tirelessly to prove his worth, whispers of discontent began to spread. There were those who believed that a man from humble beginnings like Wei didn't deserve the power he was amassing. But Wei wasn't deterred. He knew that in the world of the Triads, survival meant staying one step ahead of both your enemies and your allies. By the time he was 25, Wei was one of Chairman Lin's most trusted lieutenants. He was entrusted with high-stakes operations and attended secret meetings where the future of the Triad was decided. But with power came pressure. Wei lived under the constant threat of betrayal. Every glance, every conversation carried a hint of suspicion. He couldn't afford to trust anyone completely. Despite his success, Wei remained haunted by the choices he had made. He thought often of his family back in the village, of the simple life he had abandoned. But there was no going back. The Triad was his life now, and leaving wasn't an option. The deeper he delved into the organization, the more he realized how tightly its grip held him. The seeds of Wei's ambition were taking root, but so too were the seeds of his eventual downfall. The higher he climbed, the more dangerous the game became. And while Wei believed he was in control, forces beyond his understanding were already at work, setting the stage for a storm that would shake the very foundation of the Triads. In the shadows of Hong Kong's glittering skyline, power was a dangerous illusion. Wei Zhang had stepped into a world where trust was a weakness, loyalty was a weapon, and betrayal was a death sentence. He was playing a game where the stakes were his life and the lives of everyone around him. As he looked out over the bustling harbor, Wei couldn't have known that his rise would be just the beginning of a journey that would change everything. Unbeknownst to him, the alliances he relied on would soon be tested, the loyalties he believed in would be shattered, and the empire he had worked so hard to serve would begin to crumble from within. By the late 1980s, Hong Kong was teetering on the edge of transformation. The impending handover to China created an air of uncertainty, and while the city's legitimate sectors prepared for the change, the criminal underworld sensed opportunity. Amid the shifting tides, the Triads worked tirelessly to solidify their grip on power. For the Sun Yee On, one operation promised to secure their dominance: the Golden Shipment, a massive heroin deal sourced from the Golden Triangle. This single operation would ensure millions in profit, a critical move as rival Triads and foreign criminal organizations vied for control of the lucrative trade. Wei Zhang, now a trusted lieutenant within the Sun Yee On, was chosen to oversee the operation. The selection was both an honor and a heavy burden. The stakes were immense, and failure wasn't an option. The deal involved not just the Sun Yee On but also the 14,000 Triad, their bitter rivals. Such alliances were rare and precarious, built more on mutual need than trust. Wei's task was to ensure the shipment's arrival and its smooth transfer between the two groups, a logistical nightmare fraught with risks. The shipment would arrive by sea, concealed within crates of seafood to mask the smell of heroin from port inspections. Wei meticulously planned the operation, selecting only his most loyal men to handle the transfer. The harbor was chosen as the meeting point, its dark alleys and sprawling warehouses providing the perfect cover. Every detail was accounted for, from bribing customs officials to scouting escape routes in case of a raid. Despite the careful planning, something felt off. Wei had always trusted his instincts, and this time they screamed of trouble. Small things didn't add up. There were whispers in the ranks, a nervous tension among some of his men. One figure, in particular, drew his suspicion: Liang Chen, a lower-ranking member who had been acting strangely in recent weeks. Liang's unease stood out in an organization where composure was crucial. His furtive glances, the way he hesitated when questioned, all of it raised red flags. Wei wasn't the type to act impulsively. He decided to keep an eye on Liang, biding his time until he could confirm his suspicions. As the shipment date approached, Wei doubled his security measures, ensuring that any potential leaks would be contained. He made it clear to his crew that failure would have consequences, a warning that resonated deeply in the brutal world of the Triads. The night of the shipment was marked by an eerie calm. The harbor, usually alive with activity, was quiet save for the sound of waves lapping against the docks. Wei arrived early, scanning the surroundings for anything out of place. The crates arrived on schedule, carried by fishing boats that slipped in under the cover of darkness. The operation began smoothly, with workers unloading the cargo and transferring it to waiting trucks. Just as the final crates were being loaded, the sound of approaching sirens pierced the night. The calm shattered as police vehicles surrounded the area, their lights flashing in the darkness. Chaos erupted. Wei's men scrambled to defend the shipment, drawing weapons as the police closed in. Gunfire lit up the harbor, the crack of bullets echoing over the water. Amid the chaos, Wei's attention was drawn to a figure slipping away from the scene. Liang Chen, his suspicions confirmed, was fleeing toward the shadows. In the flash of lights and gunfire, Wei caught a glimpse of a police radio tucked inside Liang's jacket. Betrayal burned through him, sharper than any bullet. The shootout ended in disaster. Several of Wei's men were killed, and the shipment was partially seized by the authorities. It was a devastating blow, both financially and strategically. Wei knew the consequences of failure. Chairman Lin was a man who tolerated no weakness, and losing a shipment of this magnitude would bring harsh repercussions. Liang didn't escape for long. Days later, his body was found floating in Victoria Harbor, a gruesome warning to anyone who dared betray the Sun Yuan. But even as Wei dealt with the mole, the damage had been done. The failed operation left a stain on his reputation. Within the Triad, failure wasn't easily forgiven, and Wei's position became precarious. Rumors began to circulate. Some whispered that Wei's leadership had grown reckless, that he was losing his edge. Others questioned how the police had learned of the shipment in the first place, insinuating that there might be more betrayal lurking within the ranks. Wei knew he was being watched, not just by rivals but by his own brothers. To make matters worse, the 14,000 Triad, enraged by the failure of the operation, began to stir trouble. Accusations flew, blaming Wei and his crew for the botched deal. Tensions between the two groups escalated, threatening to spill into open violence. Amid the turmoil, Wei found himself increasingly isolated. He couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just a random failure. There were too many coincidences, too many moving pieces. He began to suspect that someone higher up had orchestrated the debacle, using him as a pawn in a larger game. As the fallout from the golden shipment unfolded, Wei's focus shifted. His instincts told him that the betrayal ran deeper than Liang Chen, and if he wanted to survive, he needed to uncover the truth. But doing so would mean risking everything, stepping into a world of hidden alliances and silent enemies. Wei was no stranger to danger, but this was different. The golden shipment had exposed cracks in the empire, fractures that threatened to widen into a collapse. For the first time, Wei began to question not just his place in the Triads, but the organization itself. What had seemed like a path to power now felt like a trap, and the more he struggled, the tighter it closed around him. In the aftermath of the failed shipment, the shadows around Wei grew darker. The alliances he had trusted seemed fragile, the loyalties he relied on unreliable. And somewhere in those shadows, someone was waiting. Someone who had orchestrated the chaos and who wouldn't stop until Wei was destroyed. As the fallout from the golden shipment spread through the ranks of the Sun Yee On, Wei Zhang found himself navigating increasingly treacherous waters. The botched operation had left him vulnerable, and in the world of the Triads, weakness was an invitation for attack. What Wei didn't realize was that the first blow had already been struck, not by a rival Triad or the police, but by someone much closer, Jun Wu. Jun Wu was a figure of quiet menace within the organization. Unlike the flashier members who flaunted their wealth and power, Jun operated in the shadows. He was known for his precision and his ability to manipulate situations to his advantage. While others craved attention, Jun sought control, and his methods were as subtle as they were effective. He had built a reputation as one of the Sun Yee On's most ruthless enforcers, a man who carried out orders with chilling efficiency. But Jun's takeoffs didn't stop at being a loyal lieutenant. He wanted more, and Wei's rising influence was the perfect obstacle to remove. The failed shipment provided Jun with the opportunity he had been waiting for. Behind closed doors, he began planting seeds of doubt in Chairman Lin's mind. He painted Wei as reckless and suggested that perhaps his leadership wasn't as solid as it appeared. Jun knew exactly how to wield his words, framing his accusations as concerns rather than outright attacks. He also subtly hinted that Wei's rapid rise had come with consequences, and that such ambition often bred betrayal. As Wei struggled to recover from the fallout, he began to sense that something was amiss. The whispers around him grew louder, and he noticed how some of his closest allies began to keep their distance. He had seen these patterns before, the quiet isolation that preceded a fall. What unsettled him most was the presence of Jun, who seemed to hover on the periphery of every meeting and operation. Jun's demeanor was calm, his gaze calculating. Wei couldn't shake the feeling that Jun was watching him, waiting for the right moment to strike. Determined not to go down without a fight, Wei turned his attention to Jun. His suspicions were unconfirmed, but his instinct told him that Jun was far more dangerous than he let on. Wei began digging into Jun's operations, following a trail of subtle inconsistencies that others might have overlooked. It wasn't easy. Jun was meticulous, covering his tracks with layers of plausible deniability, but Wei's persistence paid off. In a series of hidden transactions, Wei uncovered the first crack in Jun's armor. Over the years, Jun had been skimming profits from the Triads' operations, funneling the money into offshore accounts. It was a bold move, one that betrayed the very loyalty the organization demanded. Wei knew this was damning evidence, but it wasn't enough. In the world of the Triads, accusations required undeniable proof, and Wei had only uncovered the tip of the iceberg. The deeper we dug, the more he realized how far Jun's web of deception stretched. Jun wasn't working alone. He had cultivated a network of allies within the Sun Yee On, individuals who had grown resentful of Chairman Lin's leadership, or who saw Jun as a means to their own ends. These weren't just foot soldiers. They were high-ranking members, men with influence and resources. Wei's discovery was a revelation, but it was also a danger. If Jun realized that Wei was onto him, it would mean open war. The Triads didn't forgive internal betrayal, and Wei would find himself marked for death. Wei knew he had to move carefully, gathering enough evidence to expose Jun without tipping his hand too early. As Wei worked in the shadows, Jun began tightening the noose. The subtle whispers against Wei turned into quiet accusations, and his reputation within the organization began to erode. Some of the more ambitious members began aligning themselves with Jun, sensing that his rise was inevitable. Jun's manipulation was masterful. He didn't need to make outright moves against Wei. Instead, he let suspicion do the work for him, undermining Wei's credibility one piece at a time. Wei was running out of time. The more he uncovered about Jun, the more he realized the scale of his rival's ambitions. Jun wasn't just looking to take over Wei's position. He was positioning himself to challenge Chairman Lin. It was a dangerous game, one that threatened to destabilize the entire organization. The Sun Yee On was built on a strict hierarchy, and any disruption at the top could ripple through the ranks, weakening the Triad as a whole. Wei's position grew more precarious with each passing day. His allies were dwindling, his every move scrutinized, but he couldn't afford to stop. He had seen what happened to men who were cast out of the Triads. Their deaths were brutal, often public, serving as a message to anyone else who dared step out of line. The tension between Wei and Jun reached a boiling point during a high-level meeting of the Triad's leadership. The room was heavy with unspoken tension, each man acutely aware of the shifting power dynamics. Wei remained silent, observing how Jun subtly dominated the conversation, his words carefully chosen to undermine Wei without ever naming him outright. Wei saw through the facade, but the others didn't. They were buying into Jun's narrative, his carefully constructed image of competence and control. Wei knew he needed to act, but the question remained, how? Jun's network was vast, his influence growing by the day. Any move against him would have to be calculated, precise. Wei couldn't afford another misstep. As the meeting ended, Wei caught a glimpse of Jun's expression. There was no malice, no smugness, only calm calculation. It was the look of a man who believed he had already won. Wei walked away with the weight of realization pressing on him. He wasn't just fighting to save himself. He was fighting to expose a truth that could shatter the very foundation of the Sun Yee On. In the shadows of Hong Kong, the game of power had shifted. Wei and Jun were no longer just members of the Triad. They were players in a deadly chess match where every move carried the risk of death. And in this game, there could only be one winner. Wei Zhang's battle against Jun Wu took on new urgency as the stakes grew higher. The evidence of Jun's betrayal was damning. But in the Sun Yee On, accusations without indisputable proof were meaningless and dangerous. Wei knew that confronting Jun directly would only hasten his own downfall. Jun's network of allies within the organization was vast, and any misstep would be seized upon. Instead, we resolved to act from the shadows, leveraging every resource at his disposal to uncover the full scope of Jun's treachery. Wei's investigation led him to a series of offshore accounts tied to Jun. The accounts, carefully hidden under layers of false identities, revealed a trail of embezzlement stretching back years. Jun had not only stolen from the Triad, but also funneled funds into secret operations that bypassed Chairman Lin entirely. Wei realized this wasn't just about greed. Jun was consolidating power for a takeover. With this knowledge, Wei began piecing together a larger puzzle. Jun's betrayal was systematic, designed to weaken the Sun Yee On's core while building a loyal faction of his own. The problem was timing. Wei's position within the organization was crumbling under the weight of Jun's manipulations. Allies who once stood by him had gone silent, unwilling to risk their own lives by opposing the man who seemed destined to rise. Even Chairman Lin, once a staunch supporter of Wei, began to grow distant. The whispers had done their work. Wei was no longer seen as the loyal and confident lieutenant he had once been. Instead, he was viewed as reckless, a man whose failures had cost the organization dearly. Wei knew he needed to act decisively, but each step forward brought new challenges. Jun's growing influence wasn't just a threat to Wei, it was a threat to the entire Triad. If Jun succeeded in his power grab, the Sun Yee On would be thrown into chaos. Rival factions within the organization would splinter off, and their enemies, the 14K and other Triads, would see the opportunity to strike. The stability of the Sun Yee On, built over decades, was at risk of collapsing under the weight of internal betrayal. Determined to expose Jun, Wei turned to one of the few remaining allies he trusted, Liu, a low-level operative with a knack for uncovering hidden information. Liu was loyal not out of friendship, but out of practicality. He knew that Jun's rise would destabilize the organization and that chaos would trickle down to every rank. Together, they began tracking Jun's movements, looking for patterns or meetings that could reveal his next move. The breakthrough came when Liu uncovered a shipment scheduled to arrive at the harbor in secret. On the surface, it appeared to be a standard smuggling operation, the kind the Triad handled routinely. But the details didn't add up. The shipment had been arranged through Jun's network, with no oversight from Chairman Lin or the higher-ups. Wei recognized it as another piece of Jun's scheme, a way to fund his growing faction while keeping the operation off the books. Wei decided to intercept the shipment. It was a dangerous move. If the operation went wrong, it would be seen as another failure on his part. Worse, it could expose his efforts to undermine Jun, putting a target squarely on his back. But Wei had no choice. He needed proof, something concrete that could turn the tide against Jun. On the night of the shipment, Wei and a small team of loyalists positioned themselves at the harbor. The scene was eerily familiar, reminiscent of the failed Golden Shipment. This time, however, Wei had no intention of letting the operation spiral out of control. As the crates were unloaded, Wei's men moved in, quickly securing the area. What they found confirmed Wei's suspicions. The crates contained weapons, military-grade firearms destined for Jun's faction. It was a blatant violation of the Triads code, which strictly controlled the flow of arms to prevent infighting. The discovery was a turning point. Wei now had the proof he needed to expose Jun's betrayal. But the operation didn't go unnoticed. As Wei and his men began documenting the evidence, Jun's enforcers arrived, guns drawn. The confrontation was swift and brutal. Wei's men were outnumbered, and the firefight that erupted echoed across the harbor. Wei fought with a desperation born of knowing what was at stake. He couldn't afford to lose, not just the battle, but the evidence that could bring down Jun. In the chaos, Liu was killed, his body falling beside the crates they had uncovered. Wei barely managed to escape, clutching the proof he had risked everything to obtain. Injured and alone, he disappeared into the shadows, knowing that the war with Jun had reached its breaking point. The aftermath of the confrontation left Wei more isolated than ever. Jun seized the opportunity to paint Wei as a rogue operative, accusing him of disrupting sanctioned operations and endangering the organization. Chairman Lin, already skeptical of Wei, began to view him as a liability. The walls were closing in, and Wei realized that he had only one chance left: to confront Jun directly and reveal the truth. But Jun wasn't waiting idly. The failed shipment only strengthened his resolve. He knew Wei was a threat, and he wouldn't stop until that threat was eliminated. As Wei licked his wounds and planned his next move, Jun's men scoured the city, hunting him with relentless precision. The city itself seemed to mirror the tension between the two men. Hong Kong's bright lights and bustling streets became a backdrop for a deadly game of cat and mouse. Wei moved carefully, using the knowledge he had gained over years in the Triad to stay one step ahead. But he couldn't run forever. In the shadows of the city, Wei prepared for the final act of his struggle. The evidence he had gathered was his last weapon, and he knew that using it would come at a cost. But the alternative was unthinkable. If Jun succeeded, the Sun Yee On would fall into chaos, and Wei's own life would be forfeit. With everything on the line, Wei steeled himself for the confrontation that would determine not just his fate, but the future of the Triad itself. The stage was set for a final confrontation, and Wei Zhang knew it. For weeks, he had been living in the shadows, evading Jun Wu's men while piecing together the last remnants of his plan. The evidence against Jun, his embezzlement, his secret shipments, and his network of loyalists was undeniable. But simply possessing the proof wasn't enough. Wei had learned the hard way that the Triads operated on power, not truth. To bring down Jun, Wei needed to present the evidence in a way that left no room for doubt. A move so decisive it would not only expose Jun, but also restore Wei's standing within the Sun Yee On. The annual Leadership Council meeting loomed on the horizon. It was the only time when all major players in the Sun Yee On gathered in one place, a rare event that symbolized unity, but often masked the shifting alliances and power struggles beneath the surface. Wei saw it as his last chance. If he could reveal Jun's betrayal in front of the entire council, it would be impossible for Jun to spin the narrative in his favor. The meeting was dangerous territory, a room filled with men who would kill to protect their secrets. Wei understood the risks, but he also knew that hesitation would mean certain death. Wei spent the days leading up to the meeting preparing meticulously. He secured the incriminating documents, including financial records and the details of the intercepted weapons shipment. But he needed more than paper. Wei reached out to an unexpected ally, an insider within Jun's network who had grown disillusioned with his methods. This individual, a mid-level operative, provided additional details about Jun's plans to destabilize the organization. With this testimony, Wei's case grew stronger. The night of the meeting arrived, and Wei entered the council hall under heavy scrutiny. The room, dimly lit and suffocating with tension, was filled with the Sun Yee On's most powerful figures. Chairman Lin sat at the head of the table, his expression as unreadable as ever. Jun was also present, his calm demeanor hiding the storm Wei knew was brewing beneath the surface. Wei could feel the weight of every gaze upon him, the suspicion, the curiosity, and in some cases, the quiet expectation of his downfall. The meeting began as usual, with reports on the organization's activities and financials. Wei waited patiently, knowing that his moment would come. When the discussion turned to the recent failures, the golden shipment, the disrupted arms deal, and the growing tension with rival Triads, Jun seized the opportunity to strike. In measured tones, Jun painted Wei as a liability, a man whose recklessness had cost the organization dearly. Jun's words carried weight, and the murmurs of agreement around the room were unmistakable. Wei didn't flinch. When Jun finished, Wei rose to address the council. His voice was steady, his words carefully chosen. He acknowledged the failures but redirected the focus to the deeper issues threatening the Sun Yee On. Wei laid out the evidence methodically, starting with the financial records that showed Jun's years of embezzlement. He presented the details of the intercepted arms shipment, linking it directly to Jun's secret operations. Finally, he called on the insider, who revealed Jun's plans to overthrow Chairman Lin and take control of the organization. The room fell into a tense silence as the weight of Wei's accusations sank in. Chairman Lin's expression darkened, his piercing gaze shifting between Wei and Jun. Jun, for the first time, appeared shaken. His calm facade cracked as he scrambled to defend himself, claiming that the evidence was fabricated and the testimony unreliable. But the details were too precise, the connections too strong. Wei knew he had struck a nerve, but the battle wasn't over. Jun wasn't a man who accepted defeat easily. As the council debated the evidence, Jun's loyalists began to stir, their loyalty to him outweighing their fear of the truth. The tension in the room reached a boiling point, and it became clear that the conflict wouldn't end with words. The first gunshot shattered the silence, and chaos erupted. Jun's men moved to protect him, while others loyal to the organization's stability turned on them. The council hall became a battlefield, the echoes of gunfire and shouts filling the air. Wei fought with the same desperation that had carried him through every trial. He knew that survival alone wouldn't be enough. Jun had to be stopped, here and now. In the midst of the chaos, Wei confronted Jun directly. The two men, once allies, now stood as enemies in a fight that would determine the future of the Sun Yee On. Wei's injuries from the previous weeks slowed him, but his determination burned brighter than ever. Jun, skilled and ruthless, fought with everything he had. The struggle was brutal, each man pushing himself to the limit. Finally, Wei gained the upper hand. With a decisive move, he incapacitated Jun, leaving him defenseless. As the gunfire around them subsided, Wei dragged Jun before Chairman Lin and the surviving council members. Jun, bloodied and defeated, could no longer deny his betrayal. The evidence, combined with his actions that night, sealed his fate. Chairman Lin delivered the judgment swiftly. Jun was removed from the council hall, his punishment left to the organization's enforcers. The remnants of Jun's network were dismantled, and his loyalists faced similar fates. The Sun Yee On, though shaken, began the slow process of stabilizing. Wei stood before the council, battered but resolute. His actions had saved the organization from collapse, but the cost had been high. He had lost allies, endured betrayal, and seen the darker depths of the world he had dedicated his life to. Chairman Lin acknowledged Wei's loyalty and reinstated his position, but Wei knew that the victory was bittersweet. In the days that followed, Wei reflected on the events that had unfolded. He had survived the deadly power struggle, but the scars, both physical and emotional, remained. The Triads had always been a world of shadows, where loyalty was fleeting and betrayal inevitable. Wei understood that his battle with Jun was just one chapter in a larger story, a story of power, greed, and survival in the dark underbelly of Hong Kong. Though he had won, Wei knew the game was far from over. The shadows were always shifting, and in the world of the Triads, the next threat was never far away. Thank you for joining us on Mystery Minds. The story of the Triads is a chilling reminder of the corruption and violence lurking beneath the surface of power. What are your thoughts on Wei's rise and fall? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on more true crime stories that reveal the darkest corners of humanity. Until next time, stay curious and stay safe.